Good morning, Tina. How are you today?
Good morning, Bernardo. I'm great. It's great to be here in Portugal with you.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing to be here enjoying a few sunny days.
Indeed.
So as you know, I've been having these chats with Daro about LLM system evaluation, and now he threw us under the bus and he wants us to discuss about A/B testing and explain how we basically leverage A/B testing for kind of evaluating different versions of our systems in the past. So could you briefly explain what A/B testing is for the audience that is not familiar with statistical tests, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a really actually interesting topic to talk about in the kind of LLM system evaluation space. But A/B testing is basically a statistical method to compare two or more different variants of your product, either feature, or in our case would be an LLM system. Mm-hmm. And the idea is that you have a control group. So the model that stays the same, maybe it has already been running in production. And we have the new model that has been developed. It has already maybe been tested, or it was tested by the engineers and also like human evaluation.
Yeah.
And then we want to actually know that it will have positive impact on our business metrics.
Okay.
So we'll be comparing these two different versions of the model.
Yeah.
And then trying to understand if the new model is actually better than the previous one.
Okay. So when you say a model, I would assume that a model could mean a few things, right? Could be like different LLM that you are basically testing, maybe GPT-4 or Claude, for example. Could be also that you made a change to the prompt that you are using and you're comparing prompts as well. So when we say model, like model A/B testing, when we say model in general, it could be like minor change to any component in that system, right? In the context of okay, understood.
Yes, absolutely.
Understood.
So all these different aspects, it could be changed into the prompt, the hyperparameters, fine-tuning, different model. So there's like all these kind of different aspects that you could change.
Okay. If I understood correctly as well, when we say we leave everything constant, is that we don't change the UI, for example, we don't change the way we are kind of inviting users, so we keep everything constant, and the only thing that changes from one group, from the control group to the experiment group, is that specific change that we want to measure.
Yeah, exactly. That's the goal. But actually, in reality, it's always a bit harder to control that environment as it is actually in theory. Even for us, we're like at that moment we're developing new features and shipping them very quickly. Mm-hmm. So the pace of development was actually very, very fast.
Yeah.
So when you want to introduce one change, it could be that at the same time there will be like new things also coming into the product that could impact it. So kind of we wanted to really control that we would be able to minimize kind of improvement or non-improvement that we would see from the new model or new LLM system that we're bringing in.
Yeah.
We would want to minimize the chance that something else actually changed that outcome.
Yeah, I can imagine that in a fast-paced environment, like in a startup, for example.
Yeah,
you cannot really say, hey, let's stop all development for 4 weeks because we are actually A/B testing this new feature.
Indeed. And we were still conducting the A/B tests when we were in a private beta mode. That's when we started.
Okay.
So the volume of users was actually quite low. And in order for us to actually get and conduct an A/B test that would be somehow statistically significant and we could trust the results, it was quite a challenge. We needed to balance between running the tests longer or then
shipping
earlier, or also then just like not getting the statistical results, but kind of do we trust that this is a representative sample that is enough?
Yeah. Okay. Like make like a judgment call when it comes to, is this really statistically significant? Maybe not, but we actually know, like we see some promise and then we still make that call and take some risks. Yeah, it makes sense. I remember now that we were still in beta actually when we were doing model A/B testing. And it was really, really nice time, I guess, like very exciting and challenging at the same time.
Yeah. And I think what is great about A/B testing is really that we are able to tie the performance of the LLM system to the business metrics. because I think that's typically the challenge, that you can test, like for the text generation, you can text if it's, if there's hallucinations, or if there is, if is it helpful, etc. But eventually, does it move the meat? Because we are still running a business, so we don't just want to have like the great LLM, but we actually need to provide some value for the users.
I could imagine that the ultimate metric for like most of the products is obviously like retention, right? But what was I think, if I'm not wrong, we use some other metric like as a proxy to kind of retention. Could you remind me of what that metric was, like the metric that we defined for the A/B testing experiment?
Yeah. So of course, for a subscription business, retention is the ultimate metric that you want to track and understand. But actually, through kind of our other product and analytics initiatives, we have already like identified the kind of key variables that impact that retention rate. And for us, one of the biggest ones is actually the copy rate. So when you're generating an email, is that email actually going to be used or not? And this is a very simple human feedback, kind of thumbs up, thumbs down. Did you copy or did you not copy? And this is what we also used in the A/B test as the kind of key metric. So we wanted to see if the copy rate improves or not with this new LLM system.
Okay, I see. So we were tracking how many times users in the control group copied the feature that was in the product already. And then for the users in the experiment group, we basically deployed the new feature with the new model. And then we were basically comparing the copy rates. And then we wanted to see like a difference, like a positive difference between the experiment group and I could imagine that even if you see a difference and you see statistical significance in the test, it could be quite hard especially for the engineers that worked on the feature, to understand really why. Like, you could have like some ideas, but the test is not gonna really tell you, okay, these users are copying more often because of this and that. It's just, okay, you see this number, you assume it's better, but you don't really know why, right?
Yeah. And that's definitely one of the shortcomings of A/B tests, because you don't know which kind of each individual component is, how is it impacting into the final output.
Yeah.
Because if you think about like when you're sending an email, each user will have a different criteria of when do they actually accept that it's an email you can send. So they might have different style that they want to have. They might have requirements for length, for the content, etc. So there's like so many different things that come into it. And then of course, it's also like, if there's some like RAG pipeline, has the information been retrieved correctly for that email, and like the content and etc. So there's really a lot of different aspects that could impact it. Perhaps now that the LLM judges are getting more popular, it could be used to kind of then try to evaluate kind of from which of the components did the improvement come from.
If you are using already like LLMs as a judge and you have defined like important metrics for your application, then you could take that data and run like a proper investigation, like offline, obviously, but you could basically compare like the outputs and try to understand. Let's say, it could be actually quite interesting. You could try to understand what impacted more, like what has more weight in the decision of basically copying that output or not. Although, as you said, there are so many different aspects that could impact the copy rate, and it all comes down to the user preference, especially in communication. There are many different factors. You already mentioned some of the challenges that we encountered, but maybe you could expand a little bit more, like what was the like major roadblocks or issues that we encountered when we wanted to get started with LLM system A/B testing, let's call it like that, like using A/B testing for testing different versions of an LLM system.
For us, it was still a few years ago that we started this. And while A/B testing is a very like old and traditional method to evaluate different
websites as well,
websites and like products, etc., it was kind of new to evaluate LLM systems with that. And there was a lot of kind of experimentation and research and kind of things we needed to come up with in order to set this up.
Mm-hmm.
And just to like make sure that is this kind of like a valid testing method for us. Mm-hmm. Setting it up, we ended up like implementing it ourselves, creating the randomization algorithm, collecting that data, like the tracking events of do you copy the generation or not.
I remember that for us, because of how our product works, so basically our product produces 3 different outputs and the user could choose. I think that made the test a little bit more complex and the data collection process as well, because for the same input you have 3 different outputs, and then those outputs are shown in different tabs, so that could have like a particular impact on depending on the user, right? Like, because you might be super lazy and you might not even want to open the 3rd tab, so we had to deal with that. So I would say that how your product is designed or works is gonna have some kind of impact in the complexity of implementing A/B testing in this particular context when it comes to data collection, feedback collection as well. I think we need to make some smart decisions there, and Naro did a really good job, like trying to collect automatic feedback from users without really annoying the users, right? Which is like a important problem. I think it was a challenge, right?
Yeah, and that's a very good point. And it was definitely something that you need to take into account in the test design when you are designing kind of the data model of what you're collecting and how you measure things. And this is actually not just a problem in kind of the LLM world or building products, but it's a typical problem of aligning the business metrics. That does everyone have the same definition of what is a copy event, for example, or what is a generation, etc. And we ended up actually kind of aggregating it because we know that the users typically copy the first one that they see, even if you have different options.
Yeah.
You end up not even looking at them, but you just copy the kind of first one you see. So we ended up then aggregating the kind of generation of the 3 outputs into one and then see if any of them were copied.
Okay, so we were working with generation events, right?
Yeah.
So the copy rates were for a generation event where we were producing 3 outputs actually. Yeah. And actually now I remember that we were using a tool for collecting this data and the feedback. We had some issues because obviously the tool was designed to work with rows basically, and each row is a data point. It's meant to be an output.
Yeah.
But as we were working with generation events, for us 3 rows were actually one generation event, and then the copy rate was only applicable to the 3 rows. So it was quite hard to implement that, even if it at a first glance it feels like quite simple, but then these kind of particularities makes everything like a bit more complex.
Yeah, it's a bit more complex. You have to put a bit more effort into the planning, and then also like for the analysis, you have to do a little bit more like data processing and transformations.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. But it's doable. We did it. So
yeah, we did it.
So Tina, what do you think that is the main benefit of implementing model A/B testing when you are working with LLM power systems? And how do you see this approach working perhaps together with more novel evaluation techniques like LLMs as a judge?
Yeah, I think the biggest benefit is really that you can actually test with the real world situation. Mm-hmm. You don't have some arbitrary data set that you're kind of trying to benchmark it against if it's a good or not, or you're not kind of using your subjective opinion if an output is a good or not, but you actually get like real user feedback. And we already mentioned this a little bit earlier as well, but I think the challenge with LLM system evaluations is like, how do you actually tie it to the business metrics? And then I think the A/B testing is like very, very good method to see how it impacts actually like those metrics that you want to
step towards like connecting, let's call them like AI metrics with business metrics. Sometimes there's like a gap there.
Yeah. And if I think more into the future of like how is A/B testing going to be around and how it's going to play into the whole evaluation kind of framework, I think definitely it at least at this moment it's kind of an add-on. So you need to have that like offline evaluation, testing with the engineers, maybe running some benchmarks.
For sure.
definitely it's a one way of kind of ensuring that your LLM system works and it doesn't produce anything that you don't want to in kind of like a more controlled setting.
Let's say that you ship the new version of your system and actually let's stay in the context of what we were discussing, like the copy rates. Let's say that we ship the new version and we see that actually the copy rate metric kind of declines. It could be that your new version is actually performing as you were expecting, but actually you had assumed that your users were going to like that new type of generations, for example, but actually they don't really like it. So it's really good that it's not only about evaluating the AI system. It's also about understanding your users a little bit better, like making decisions based on those comparisons. And then apart from that, I see it quite useful when for some reason you cannot really evaluate at every single step in your pipeline or in your system, and then what you can do is like stay like a little bit like a higher level, and then you use just one business metric like the copy rates for evaluating everything, and then if you need more details you could run like a posterior investigation, for example, maybe with domain experts. Maybe the engineers could use LLM judges that you have already. At that time, we didn't have LLM judges. We didn't have like the powerful enough models for that, but now we do. So I think it's a nice complementary approach to other evaluation methods, and especially if you have like an easy way of collecting feedback from your product, automatic feedback.
And I think like what is also good to emphasize here is the collaboration.
Yeah.
So the engineers cannot work in silos, but you really have to be like actively involved with the product management, maybe even the data team, analytics, to kind of make sure that
definitely
you are building things and
that makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense and will actually improve your business.
Yeah, I strongly agree with that. I think that also like it works like both ways. It's bi-directional. Like understanding like for the AI engineers and to understand like business metrics, product metrics is really important, and the other way around, because then you could basically use that understanding for creating even better metrics that account for more aspects. Like so, yeah. I think this was great, Tina. I had like a lot of fun, and it was really great to remember everything that we did. Like
trip down the memory lane.
Exactly. Everything has changed so much, but it still feels like A/B testing, like model A/B testing, could be like a relevant approach. Nothing else from my side. Do you wanna say goodbye to our audience? Or?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Bernardo.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Tina. See you soon.